Podcasting from the beautiful state of Maine, welcome to another episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast, the show that focuses on identifying and developing the skills and behaviors that will inspire, empower, and compel others to follow your lead. Listen as Patrick's guests talk about the powerful leadership approaches they have identified and developed, which are vital for leading in today's challenging times. These are the same approaches that will positively impact you as a leader too. Learning from Leaders provides the right balance of leadership research with real-world scenarios, making it easy for you to rise above your best. All right, let's start the show.
Hey everybody, I'm Patrick Verano. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Learning from Leaders. And on this episode, I want to talk about quiet quitting. And before you turn this off, because you're tired of hearing about quiet quitting, I want to talk about a different type of quiet quitting, one that quite honestly I think is more damaging than what we're hearing in the employment community. And I think they're related, but I do think it goes deeper, is that for those that have found themselves quietly quitting at their jobs, I believe there's something deeper going on here. And I think it's really about people quietly quitting on themselves. And I know some of you might be getting defensive right now, saying, well, that's not me, and maybe it's not you. But I do know that, and having been there myself as a quiet quitter, I know that when I was in that space, it said more about me than it did about the job that I was in. And in a way, quiet quitting was a resignation for me, that somehow it couldn't get any better than where I was. And I didn't have any means to elevate where I wanted to go. And until I changed that, I stayed in that quiet quitting space. So when I'm talking about people that are quietly quitting at their jobs and drawing it back to a belief that people might be just quietly quitting on themselves as well, is I do see that people, and I've worked with individuals like that feel like they have no other options, that they're stuck where they are. And when we do that, we really have quietly quit on ourselves. We've come to the point where we don't believe that we can change things, that we have the power, the ability, the resourcefulness to change the path that we're on. And I think we need to change that. And it could come from a number of areas. Maybe you've tried making a decision before that didn't work out, it failed. And that builds a narrative in us that we can't do it. And we don't forget those things. So in this episode, I want to talk about really 3 different stages to this. The first, I want to talk about 3 common items that we all come in contact with that I think we can gain a great deal of inspiration for if we look at them differently. The next, I want to talk about how do we build our own personal well-being. And I think that's really important to build us from a standpoint of confidence. And then lastly, I want to talk about when you're making that decision that you're not going to quietly quit anymore and you want something more, maybe out of your career or out of a relationship you're in, how do you set those goals to make that happen? And we're going to talk about a specific model. So first, the 3 items that we all come in contact with that I believe if we look to them in the right way, they can provide inspiration for us. And the first one is a GPS. And just like in our cars or on our phone, when we plug in on our GPS a direction that we're going to go in, if we drive in that direction and say we're on the highway and it tells us to get off at an exit, if we miss that exit, our GPS simply says recalculating and tells us the next exit we need to get off of to get back on track. Our time might be a little different, might take us a little longer. The route might look a little different now, but our destination is the same. It's charted out how we're going to get there. Now, if I miss the next exit, my GPS is still going to say recalculating, and it will continue to do that. At no point does my GPS say, Patrick, pull your car over. You're not qualified to get to your destination. Give up. Yet we do that to ourselves all the time. If we're in this quiet quitting space, I believe that maybe a choice, a decision we made didn't go the way we wanted it to, and then we just say, can't do it. I can't get there. We park our physical cars ourselves, and we give up. When really we need to treat ourselves as that GPS. The next is around antique furniture. For those of you that maybe have seen the Antiques Roadshow, one of my favorite episodes was when a couple was on there and they were talking about a piece of furniture that they had decided to have refinished. And this piece of furniture was in their house or in their possession for generations. And it looked beautiful. It was like a showroom piece when they brought it in. And the appraiser was going over the piece and said, in its current condition, it's worth about $5,000. He said, however, had you not refinished it, it would be worth several $1,000s more. And that really made me think a lot about where our value comes from. And how often do we look at the mistakes we've made, the challenges, the things we've done that we're embarrassed about, and we try and remove those. We try and get rid of those. We don't want anybody to know about those things. Yet in reality, I believe that those things provide us that same value. That's our patina. There's a quote that I was able to find in a magazine, an antiques magazine years ago, by a dealer, an appraiser, around patina. It says, patina is everything that happens to an object over the course of time. The nick in the leg of a table, a scratch on a tabletop, the loss of moisture in the paint. Patina is built from all the effects, natural and man-made. I'll stop there for a minute because I do think that's like our lives. We have decisions that are man-made. We've created some of the challenges that we're faced with, but other things are natural. We have no control over them. Maybe it's our height or our hairline, whatever it might be. We don't have control over those things, but that's what makes us who we are. So it goes on to say that those are the things that create a true antique. Patina is what oftentimes gives a piece of furniture or an artifact its value. The process by which people attempt to remove the patina from the furniture or to restore the artifact has the unintended consequence of reducing the value of the piece. Again, I look at things like Facebook or Instagram or any other social media app that has a filter on it, and how many times do we do that? We want to get it just right, change the filter on it so our skin looks better, our complexion looks better. That's not really who we are. And I think that weighs on us when we do that too much. The next is the smoke detector. This is our third article that I want to talk about. We have one of these in our brain, and it's called the amygdala. And I think this often holds us back. It holds us hostage to the quiet quitting environment. When we're in a position that we say, I'm going to change careers, I'm going to leave this job, I'm going to go pursue something else. And the amygdala, our smoke detector, says, you can't do that. Don't take a risk. You have so much to lose and not a lot to gain by doing that. Don't do it. And it's very much like a smoke detector in our house in that it's not a real emergency. Our amygdala is set up to protect us, our well-being. But oftentimes the things that threaten us today are not the things that threatened us thousands of years ago that were legitimate things to be afraid of, like a saber-toothed tiger. We can do the same thing with the smoke detector in our brain. Imagine that if food is burning on the stove and your smoke detector goes off, it's telling you that there's an emergency, but you know it's not real. So what do? You go over and you wave something in front of it and you stop the smoke detector from going off. Or maybe you have to take the battery out for a little bit or unplug it. But at no point do you run into the street calling 911 saying that your smoke detector is going off because you know it's not a real emergency. You've taken a moment to assess the situation and realize this is not real. We need to do the same thing with our minds, with that smoke detector called our amygdala, and really question, is this a real emergency or not? And 9 times out of 10, you will realize that this is not a real threat, and there's a way around that. From there, I want to talk about building our own well-being. And there's a model that I use called POWER. And I created a journal around this, and it's based on some research that was done by Sean Aker primarily in a challenge that he did called the 21-Day Happiness Challenge. But also it has a number of other different pieces of research that are associated with the benefits of these 5 activities. The first activity is praise. It's writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day. at least 3 things. And I would suggest do it in the morning. Do it first thing when you wake up. And I think that's so important because we start our day out from a standpoint of positivity, right? Rather than dreading that we're going to work today, start out from a standpoint of gratitude. What am I grateful for today? Next, we move on to the O in the power journal, and that's around others. Do something for somebody else every day. Try and find something you can do, small or large. And we know the benefits that generosity or volunteerism has on well-being. We feel better when we make other people feel better. The next is the W in the power journal, and that's about writing. Again, I would recommend doing this at the end of the day, but all it involves is writing 2 or 3 sentences about what went well during the day. Now think about that. If I start my day out with gratitude, right, the praise, and now I end my day taking inventory of what went well during the day, I've bookended my day positively. And I think it's reverse to what we might normally do. The next is around exercise. That's the E in the power journal. And it's recommending to find at least 10 minutes a day, just 10 minutes a day to be active. Might be a walk around the block, but find 10 minutes. And then lastly, the R is about relaxation, and it's about finding time to meditate or just quiet time in a minimum of 2 minutes. That's it. That could be square breathing, which all square breathing is you breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, and then you start all over again. You do that for 2 minutes. And again, there is so much research on the benefits that things like mindfulness and breathing exercises have on creating a state of well-being. So lastly, once we've talked about our GPS and the value of making mistakes and shutting off our smoke detectors when they're overreacting, we've then talked about well-being. Now we're in a place where we can talk about let's set some goals on where we want to go. And specifically, let's set goals. And those are goals that are specific, emotional, and time-bound. It's a model that I use quite regularly to help me refine what do I want. So the first part, specific. What is it specifically that I want to do? Be as refined as you can on that. The next part is the emotional component of this. And I talk about this in my book, The Leadership Bridge. Challenge yourself to ask why 5 times. Whatever that goal is, ask yourself, why do I want that goal? And whatever that answer is, ask why to that answer. Well, why do I want that? And then the next, well, why do I want that? Why do I want that? And finally, why do I want that? Now, do you have to do it 5 times every time? No, but the more consistently you can do that, what it does is it really forces you to dig down to realize, how important is this to you? Do you really want this? Because when you do it in that format, we know that if our reason isn't strong enough, our excuse will be as to why we won't follow through on it. The last part of set goals is around time-bound. Being time-bound. What or when do I want this to be achieved by? And that's really important. So if you're in a position right now, a relationship, something else that's going on that you're like, I want this to change, put a stake in the ground. When do you want it to happen by? And be realistic about it when you want that to happen. Now, along goal setting, I want to talk just quickly about another model that I have found to be extremely helpful, a book written by a gentleman named Sean Covey. And the book is called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And what I really enjoy about this book is it starts off with the first discipline is about setting a WIG. And what a WIG is a wildly important goal, something you want to stretch yourself toward. The next thing that he talks about is setting lead versus lagging indicators. And if I were to use the example of losing 10 pounds, well, the 10 pounds really is a lag indicator. I don't control the outcomes of what I want to do, but I do control the input, the leading indicators. So if it was around losing weight, well, the lead indicators could be things like monitoring my caloric intake during a day. What am I going to do for exercise during this day? Those two things I control. Those are lead indicators that if I consistently follow through on those, then it would seem logical that my lagging indicator will be in alignment with those. I don't control the lag, but I do control the lead. The next is around setting up a scoreboard. And this is really important, I think, right? Especially when we're setting goals. Where am I on achieving this goal? You've probably seen when there are fundraisers and they sort of get marked off in terms of how close people are getting to the goal. That's important for us to see. And then lastly, it's creating accountability, finding people around you that will hold you accountable to what you say you're going to do. Those things can become so important and valuable for us. And that's it. Quiet quitting is far more damaging than just not showing up fully at work. Where else have you quietly quit? Is it in a relationship? Is it in your profession? Is it in a dream, a hobby, something else that you wanted to do that you just kept pushing it off and you've quietly quit? What I've outlined here is hopefully a way that you can go back and start to break this down and take action rather than quietly quit. If you have an opportunity, it would mean the world to me if you'd take an opportunity to read my book, The Leadership Bridge. Or if you want someplace to start out, sign up for my newsletter, which is called The Real World MBA. The Real World MBA. Again, I hope you found this valuable. And until the next time we talk, I hope you're able to go out there and rise above your best. Peace.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time, keep rising above your best as a leader.